Good afternoon, everyone. It's Saturday, March 11th, which happens to be my late mother's birthday. So happy birthday to her. It's 1:09 p.m. So we're going to do the next installment of Western Liberty Network's Saturday Zoom training programs. So very good. Loretta Johnson is online with us today. And for those of you who will be watching the recording later, I'm going to share the screen right now and go through some initial preliminaries. Okay, right now you should see the Western Liberty Network webpage. And so when you go to westernlibertynetwork.org, this is what you see. Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization, which means we do not promote or oppose any political party or candidate. Any statements made by people today that imply or explicitly state a preference for a candidate or a party is completely their own statement and does not necessarily reflect the view of Western Liberty Network. But anyway, when you type in Western Liberty Network, this is what you see. The website talks about what we're doing right now. We're focusing on local nonpartisan elections. And if you're thinking about running for office, you can click on the Oregon page, and that'll take you to a site where you can go to whatever county you're living in. If you live in Wallowa County, you click on that. It tells you how to reach your county election office. From there, you can find out what races you're eligible to run for and go through the process of signing up to run for those races. If you live in Washington State and you're watching this recording, you will click the Washington flag. And when you do that, you'll get the same thing. You'll get a very similar map of the counties. And if you want to see, if you live in Douglas County, it tells you how to reach that county's office. And it will tell you what offices you're eligible to run for and how to sign up. Getting back to the Western Liberty Network website, scroll down a little further and you'll always see what we're going to be doing at our next Zoom training. This describes the one we're doing right now. And you always sign on by clicking on the big red button. Going down further, we've got news about our latest conference and other things that we're doing. You can check those out. If you want to, you can design your own training curriculum by going to our training page. If you go to our training page, the top talks about the kinds of training we provide. And then we've got training documents. If you want to know how to build your campaign team, which is what we're going to be talking about today, you click on that topic and it brings you here. And you can download any of these topics anytime you like. In fact, as you scroll down the list of topics that are available, all of them free of charge, none of them are copyrighted, so you're free to distribute them as you like. We have a link right here, which downloads a single PDF file containing all of the training documents in one click. You don't have to do them one at a time. Scroll down a little further and you see recordings of our Saturday training session. Most people watch these. We have a lot more people watch these recordings than actually attend the meetings live. But we've got over 2 years of topics. Find the topic you want, click on it, and you can see the video. So between the videos and between the training documents, you can literally design your own training curriculum. If you like what you see and you want to help Western Liberty Network financially, it requires money on an ongoing basis to keep running. Go to Support WLN, and using PayPal, you can click on any of these links. If you want to do a one-time contribution, which we're very grateful for, you can donate at the level you're comfortable with. If you want to donate monthly automatically, which we love because that's budgetable for us, you can scroll down and click on those buttons, and you can make whatever you like in the way of a contribution and help Western Liberty Network stay active and stay in the field. So I'm going to turn off screen saving right now, and I'm going to go into the training for the day. Today, we're going to be talking about building your campaign team. It's important to have a campaign team, even if you are running a very easy race, even if you are running unopposed. I like to quote whoever it is that said, if you're a lawyer and you represent yourself in court, you have a fool for your client. So it is for candidates who try to run their own campaigns. There are a lot of reasons they shouldn't run their own campaigns. For one, candidates should be focused on getting to know the issues, interacting with voters, and raising money to project the message out in public. If they're not doing those three things, they're not using their time optimally. It's important to have a campaign team to do all of the many things that what must be done for a campaign, whether it's issuing a press release or organizing a door knocking campaign or setting up a display table in advance of a speech you might be giving before a civic group, whether you're writing a campaign plan. Those are all things that you should have volunteers to help with. Another reason why you need a campaign team is because candidates can never be objective. I've worked for candidates before who would give a speech at the local Kiwanis or Optimist Club, for example. They would give a speech, and then 4 or 5 people would go up to them and after the speech say, "Oh, we love what you said. Yeah, where are you going to have a meeting? What are you going to do next?" And the candidate comes to me and says later, "You know what? I know I'm going to win this election." And I said, "Well, that's great. That's great news. What makes you think so?" And the candidate will say, "Well, everywhere I go to speak, people come up to me and they tell me they're going to vote for me." And of course, I always have to tell them, "Well, that's good, but there are people who are not going to vote for you, and those are the ones that left. Those are the ones that didn't hang around to talk to you later on." And so the moral of that story is that candidates can't be objective. They are almost never able to successfully be objective in with regard to evaluating themselves and evaluating the state of their campaign. So you need a campaign team. Some people ask, what if I'm running unopposed or running for a low-level office? Well, if you're running unopposed, it's the perfect time to run a campaign. You can't lose. And that means if you make a mistake, you still can't lose. Unless you throw yourself up to be, dressed like Genghis Khan or campaign in a Star Trek uniform, you're not going to lose. This is a great way to campaign and learn how to run a campaign. And if you make mistakes, it won't stop you, because if you're running unopposed, you're going to win. So take advantage of that, because the next campaign, you probably won't be unopposed. And if you're not unopposed, the experience you gain in running a campaign will be helpful, even if you're running unopposed. Also, it'll be good experience for the people who are on your team. If your next election you do have an opponent, you're going to need the help of people who have been, in the trenches, who have done a campaign. So build a campaign team and be out there, even if you don't have an opponent, because you will get good experience running a campaign, and the people who volunteer for you will be getting good experience running a campaign and will be better equipped to work for you when you do have an opponent, or work for some other candidate when they have an opponent. And if it's a low-level office, doesn't matter. No, there is no unimportant office. It's important that you interact with voters. One of the great things about running a campaign, if you're running unopposed, or if you're running a low-level office and no one else is running a campaign, is it gets you in touch with the voters. You actually talk to them and you learn a lot about the people that you're going to be representing. And even if you're unopposed, the people you talk to during your campaign, they will know that you are not taking their vote for granted. It's a great way to build goodwill for yourself before you take office. And you'll never know when you need to lean on that goodwill, when you have a decision to make or a difficult vote to make. So always run a campaign. Now, other things that you want to talk about is, is the candidate. This is the team itself. Who do you want to be on your team? Well, obviously, you're the top of the list. You're the candidate. And, you shouldn't run your own campaign. You should approve of the campaign plan developed by a campaign manager, which I'll talk about shortly. But basically, in an ideal, healthy campaign, the candidate is raising money for their campaign so they can project their message, run ads in the newspaper, do digital marketing, whatever it is, radio spots, whatever it is. The candidate should be raising money to project their message. They should be working hard to be aware of what is going on in their district, know the issues that are relevant to the position you're running for, and make sure you have, a good plan. Have a good idea of why you're running and what you'll do if you win, and that you have a real good grasp of the issues. It doesn't take a long time to get a passable grasp of the issues. A few hours on the internet is way better than nothing. Learn about the issues as much as you can. The third thing a candidate should do is interact with voters, whether that means knocking on doors, shaking hands at your local Dairy Queen, or talking to a newspaper reporter, or getting interviewed on the radio. All of those are ways of interacting with voters. And that is really all a campaign should be doing, himself or herself. The next person you're going to have is going to be a campaign manager, sometimes referred to as a strategist in a larger campaign. A campaign manager, this is the person who will be responsible for writing a campaign plan. If you're going to go into business, you need a business plan, and it needs to be in writing. If you go to a bank saying, I want to start a new business and I need a business loan, and the bank says, well, that's great, let me see your business plan. And you say, oh, I don't really have one written down. I have one, but it's all in my head. Okay, the bank is going to laugh you out of there. A campaign plan should be written, and we do have a training that you can look at on the training tab of the Western Liberty Network website on how to write a campaign plan and what belongs in a campaign plan. But it involves things like an earned media campaign. How are you going to do things that get news coverage? What kind of a ground game are you going to have? Are you going to knock on doors? How many volunteers are you going to have? Are you going to do speeches in the community? What's your plan to, get invited to talk to civic groups and organizations? There are all kinds of things. If you're going to spend any money, how are you going to spend it? What's your budget going to be? And what is your plan to raise whatever money you want to raise? These are things that are all part of a campaign plan. And your campaign manager or strategist is responsible for writing a campaign plan. Now, after that campaign plan is finished, the candidate looks at it, says, I like this, I don't like this. Maybe you go around a couple of times with different revisions, but ultimately the candidate signs off on the campaign plan. And with the hiring or the enlistment of a campaign manager and the drafting of a campaign plan, candidate, under ideal circumstances, should be done with everything other than raising money, interacting with voters, and dealing with the issues. Once the campaign plan is approved by the candidate, it is then the campaign manager's or strategist's job to implement and execute that campaign plan. That is their job. It's not the candidate's job. So it's important to have that. And from that point on, the campaign manager implements the plan, makes sure the trains run on time, coordinates other volunteer campaign workers that you have, and just makes everything work, implements the campaign plan. Now, another person that's critical to have is a treasurer. If you're going to be spending any money at all, you should have a treasurer. And that person should be different than you. It should never be the candidate. There's some reasons for that. If you spend more than a certain amount of money, you have to report on campaign finance, especially if you're going to spend, there's some things you can do. You can do nothing and spend $750 or less. If you spend $750 but less than $3,500, you have to form a candidate committee with the Secretary of State, but you do not have to do campaign finance reporting. If you're going to be spending more than $3,500, which is not most local races. Some school board races, you'll spend more than that. There are a few other races where you'll spend more than that. Most of the time you won't. But if you do spend more than $3,500, you must both form a campaign plan a candidate committee, and you must do transaction reporting on the Secretary of State's or STAR system. Last week, we did a report on that. We did a training on that, and you can go to it by pointing your browser to the training tab of the westernlibertynetwork.org website. And that will talk about the various limits and what you have to do. But you don't want to be in charge of the money yourself, because if you make a mistake, if you make any kind of a mistake, particularly if you're doing the reporting of financial transactions, there will be a fine and it will be public record. And your opponents will be able to say, well, look, they can't even keep their own checkbook. They can't even avoid making mistakes. How can we trust that person to run the finances of our local water district or school district or whatever it is? Have a treasurer there. If a treasurer makes the mistake and not the candidate, then it's very easy to say, the candidate didn't make the mistake. It was a mistake done by the treasurer, and he or she is a volunteer or is not paid very much or whatever it is, and they're just trying to contribute and be a part of the process. We've corrected the error and we've paid whatever fine the Secretary of State has assessed, but it's not the candidate, it's just a volunteer. When we get elected to office, we've got professionals that are running the district finances. So it's never good when there is a publicly known campaign finance transaction error, but it's much better and less damaging to the candidate or the campaign if the candidate is not the treasurer. So make sure you have this. Now, in very limited small races, like if you're running for cemetery control board, a lot of water boards, some fire and rescue boards, soil and water conservation commissions in a lot of smaller communities, you don't need a lot more than that. You'll need a candidate, a campaign manager, and a treasurer. And if you have those three things, you probably have enough to run a lot of small races in Oregon and Washington, by the way. If you can get more workers to take on roles, all the better. That means you're going to have more people getting lots of different kinds of experience, and it'll be more useful in future campaigns as well as the current campaigns. But those three are the most important that you have in a local, nonpartisan election. If you have people who are willing to do the following jobs, you will want these people on your team as well. You'll want a social media director, a communications director. This person is going to be the one that issues press releases, announcing your campaign, announcing issues that you have, running a website, running a Facebook page or an Instagram page or a Twitter page. So having somebody in that position is very, very powerful and very, very important. For some very small races, it's not necessary, but even in those races, it's very good to have someone who has some practice doing these things. So if you can, find someone to be your social media director. Another good one is field director. This is the person who will do the field, be responsible for the field work. This person will be responsible for organizing and recruiting volunteers to do door knocking campaigns or telephone campaigns or anything like that, putting up signs, whatever is going on in the field. It's good to have a field director. Sometimes, if you want to have a lot of volunteers, ask someone to be the volunteer director. Volunteer director is responsible for recruiting volunteers. You might get them from your county political party. You might get them from people who are in office that know volunteers. And they will be the ones to make sure that volunteers, have things to do, know where they're supposed to be, make sure they follow up and actually show up to do the work they promised to do. Volunteer director is very important along those lines. Typically, a field director that we talked about a moment ago and a communication director will work directly under the campaign manager. The volunteer director will typically work underneath the field director. And then you've got another position that also works under the campaign manager, and that is an information research director. Now, this person is responsible for, being your book, your encyclopedia. This person will be very helpful in assisting the candidate to research particular issues, find statistics, find studies that support positions that the candidate wants to make. Also, do some research on the candidate's opponents, if there are any opponents. See if there is anything in their background which would, compromise their ability to do the job. Maybe they're not as qualified. They don't have the qualifications. Maybe 3 weeks ago, they were arrested for, domestic abuse and drunk driving. Who knows? People generally don't like negative campaigns when it comes to local nonpartisan races, but it's important to know who your opponent is. And it's important to know that if there is something egregiously wrong, it is reasonable to point that out. Another thing information research director can do is research stands that your opponents have made in prior years or in prior elections or while serving in office. So you can say, you know, my opponent, well-meaning, good person, voted to do these things, but they turned out to be a disaster. It didn't work. I'm going to go in a different direction. That's helpful. Having an information research director to find those things is very, very useful. And then finally, you're going to want somebody to be a scheduler, somebody who's going to maintain the campaign schedule. Where will the campaign be? What events is the campaign undertaking? What dates will they take place on? When will there be campaign meetings? When will meetings be between candidates and donors? A scheduler, someone to handle the master schedule for the campaign. And there really should only be one. A scheduler is sometimes a candidate's personal assistant. A personal assistant will go with the candidate on speeches, make sure that, you know, the candidate always has a bottle of water at hand, has information at hand if the candidate needs it. Sometimes the personal assistant can, you know, do what they can to make sure the candidate gets a good meal, that they get enough sleep, take care of them, you know, nag them to take care of themselves, those sorts of things. Sometimes a candidate's personal assistant will, you know, rescue candidates from someone who, you know, maybe they're at a Kiwanis Club meeting, candidate gave a speech, this person came to ask the candidate a couple of questions, but is monopolizing the time and is taking way too much time. And the candidate assistant might be someone who says, sorry, Ms. Jones, we've got a meeting in about 20 minutes, we need to go. And then they get to be the bad guy and not the candidate in those kind of situations. And so this is the great part of your campaign team. I'm going to, in the chat window, and also this is going to be available for download on the training tab of the westernlibertynetwork.org website. I'm going to, let's see if I can figure out how to do it. Zoom always changes their interface. So I always have to look at that. Okay, here we go. Download a file, desktop. I've just put a document into the chat window. If you have access to the chat window, you can download it. It is the training document associated with this topic. So again, you're going to have the candidate. Just underneath the candidate, you're going to have the campaign manager or the strategist. Just under the campaign manager and strategist, you're going to have a treasurer, a communication director, a field director, an information director, and a scheduler. And the volunteer director will often be underneath the field director. If you have these people on your campaign team, you will have a very good campaign, provided they're reliable and they do their job, that they write a campaign, that people stick to their job. Those are all very, very important things. And then if you have a team like that, you're going to do very well. Are there any questions? I know, Loretta, you have a cell phone. It may take you a moment.
No, yeah, no, I can. Everything's good. Thank you very, very much for telling me this so far. I'm listening intently. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, this document, once again, is going to be posted on the training tab of the westernlibertynetwork.org website, which will be posted, you know, within a couple of hours of this session being ended. So with that, this is the training. It's only a half hour today, but we covered what we need to, and you now have the basics on how to build a decent campaign team, a good, workable, practical campaign team. And if you combine that with last week's training, you will know how to sign up for office and how to do the proper reporting for the level of campaign you're going to be running. So I want to thank Loretta for being on live. I want to thank all of you who will be watching this on the recording, and I wish you a very good week. We will be back next week with another training topic. So to track that, just go to the westernlibertynetwork.org website, scroll down until you see the Saturday training, and you'll know what the topic is. At this point, I'm leaning toward it being how to write and compose a campaign plan. So with that, I will end the session and download the recording, post it, And I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and God bless.